On a June night in 1980, Friday the 13th, 12 of her friends were murdered. Why should Friday the 13th, 1981 be any different? Friday the 13th, Part 2.
We're continuing with our summer campfire series with Friday the 13th, Part 2. Let's get at it.
Remember, we keep it tight, and it's a podcast world. We're ready to ignite. That's the lesson. You got it all. Tune in, turn up, come vibe with us, y'all. So remember.
Welcome to Remember That. My name's Corky, and I'm joined by my hetero life mates Brent, Cade, and Daniel. And tonight we're going to review the movie Friday the 13th, Part 2. Everybody ready?
Let's do it.
Let's break it down.
Friday the 13th, Part 2 was a 1981 American slasher film produced and directed by Steve Miner in his directorial debut, and it's written by Ron Kurz. It's the sequel to Friday the 13th and the second installment to the franchise. Adrienne King, Betsy Palmer, and Walt Gomi reprised their respective roles for this first film as Alice Hardy, Pamela Voorhees, and Mr. Crazy Ralph. Amy Steele, John Fury also star. Taking place 5 years after the first film, Part 2 follows a similar premise with an unknown stalker killing a group of camp counselors at the training camp near Crystal Lake. The film marks the debut of Jason Voorhees as the series' main antagonist. So, how do you guys want to kick this off? Want to talk about Jason or Pamela? How you guys want to start off?
Well, I guess the best way to start off is the fact that me and Brent started this movie in Spanish and got a great lesson and a throwback there to high school Spanish class. And the movie starts out with the kid walking through the streets, just humming the weird music, and obviously we see our old gal Alice from Part 1 just kind of tripping in her house. That was a kind of a crazy scene, and it obviously leads to a crazy kill that I didn't know. I forgot that Daniel told me last time that obviously she doesn't see the light of day through this movie, but I think you guys mentioned last week the reason why she ended up getting killed off was due to some kind of stalker, right? She didn't want to be in the movie or something?
Yeah, she had a stalker, and I found out today that not only did she have a stalker, this dude held her at gunpoint for a while. And when she just, because she was supposed to have a bigger role in Part 2, and she told him, she said, I don't want to do with it, to fool with it, because I don't want to have to go through anything like this again. So they actually filmed the entire movie, and when they brought her in, she didn't know she was going to die right off the bat. But when she read the script and seen that, then that's when it took place. But the movie had actually already wrapped filming before they even brought her in. And
wow,
yeah, and I think it was a long time before she done any more acting after that.
Well, that's a pretty cool tidbit. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
What I was gonna add to that was whenever she's dreaming, okay, and she's actually dreaming about the events of the first movie. So what the director is doing here is he is giving you he's bringing you back up to speed. He's giving you basically the summary of the first movie, but it's done through her nightmare that she's having. And I always thought that was a cool way to really,
I never realized that.
Yeah, I always thought that was a cool way to get you going in this movie. And then, of course, you've got the symbolic cat. So if you're watching a horror movie, and especially an 80s horror movie, an 80s slasher, and a cat shows up, that means that you are about to die and the cat is about to live. The cat always lives. So, of course, you've got this cat that shows up, and the thing about that is that the open window that the cat got through, that is supposed to be how Jason got into her house, was through that open window.
Okay.
Yep.
I see.
Yeah, that death scene was kind of brutal, man. She gets stabbed in the temple with like some kind of little pick or like some like metal pick or something like that.
Ice pick, baby.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was like, dang, man. And I think after that, it actually jumps to the first two counselors. Was it Jeff and Sandra making it to the city there?
Well, there was something else I discovered about the movie. Jeff and Sandra are the two that get killed with the spear through the back. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you know that scene was really a lot more riskier than what it got put on TV. You know what I'm saying? And they found out because I reckon it showed full frontal nudity for her and everything. And
Really?
they found out after they filmed the scene that she was only 17 years old. And they had to cut all that out and not show her any of the nudity with her.
No,
And they didn't
I
find
didn't.
out. Yeah, they didn't find that out until they filmed the entire scene, or maybe it was in post production. But anyhow, they had to. That scene was a lot more graphic and a lot more bloodier than what it ended up being, and a lot more, risky. And they had to take all that out because they had just filmed a minor, in the
Man.
book.
I did not.
I
know
did not
that.
know that.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah, but we talked about last week. I said maybe Jason didn't drown and all this other good stuff. Then we realized he'd have to be a 40-year-old man and all this stuff. But the official, what's it called? The official, whatever it is for this movie.
Like lore or timeline?
Yeah, because I was looking in a book, and from what I understood from the book, Jason did not die when they said he drowned him. Now, according to the book, Pamela was abusive to Jason because everybody says, well, why didn't he just go home, or why didn't he, whatever. But according to the book, now she was abusive to him, and he used that as an opportunity to get away from it and not go home. But it tripped him out when he seen her get killed, because obviously it was still his mom. And when he watched her get her head cut off, that's what tripped him out and made him start killing himself. According to the book, that's how it went down. Now, none of that adds up. The timeline don't add up or anything, because Jason would have still been a 40-year-old man when he started out doing this stuff. And another thing I thought was funny is at the first of the movie, he's walking down the street and little girls jumping in mud puddles and stuff like that. So he's obviously been mad. He's found Alice. Now, this is supposedly 5 years later, too.
That's what I was about to ask. How long? I thought it was 5
It's
years.
supposed to be
So
5 years.
Yeah, so he sneaks in and implants his mom's head in the refrigerator of Alice, right? So here's my thinking. She lived in the city, wherever it was, but it was probably pretty good ways from the camp. So, what'd Jason do? Get on the bus with that head in his sack or whatever? I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean,
I guess he did.
it really. All right, so
that was another thing I never caught on to. I'm like, how did this brother get this head all the way to her house?
He can't drive for sure.
Jason?
You brought up a good point, because I was wondering about this. The whole point of Friday the 13th Part 1 is the fact that a random kid drowned and the mom is mad that he drowned. Mad that the camp counselors didn't save him. Okay, in Part 2, they changed the legend, and now the kid didn't drown, he just nearly drowned.
Yeah.
So, the legend doesn't make sense. This is almost like, like Corky said, the timeline doesn't make sense, but the stories, they don't add up either.
No.
But, is there any answer to that? Was the first one, I mean, how are we supposed to make sense?
How they explained at the end when she's in the canoe and Jason's 12-year-old zombie self jumps up and grabs her, they explain all that away as to being a dream. So obviously, in reality, that scene and all that good stuff never happened. It was all a dream. So it still none of it adds up. Basically, what we have here is the 80s, and, Part 1 done good, so we've got to make some more money and put out a Part 2, and let's try to pull it together as best we can. That's how they got this movie going.
So that's what I was going to say is, you had 1980 original movie, and it was basically just ripping off Halloween, and they didn't expect it to do very well, and it ended up doing a lot better than what they thought. And so they had to come up with a sequel, but you've already killed the main killer. Yeah. So they ended up adding Jason in because they didn't have a killer. And so Part 2, that's just how it is. But it's a gore fest. It's a slasher film, and things happen to where it just doesn't make sense. And it was still making money, so the people that made the movie didn't care. But yeah, to answer your question, Brent, Jason's mom was dead, and she was the killer in the first one. And they had to do a sequel because the first one did so well and made so much money. So they had to come up with another killer, so Jason was the logical answer.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if they ever mentioned in any of the lore that his body was ever discovered. So I guess headcanon could be that he just somehow survived the drowning and was just kind of depressed and sad maybe he's went and lived off in that shed. Because I know Jenny actually mentions how she thinks someone like that was just like living off of like, animals and vegetation in the forest. So maybe he just lived in that shed for a long, but it's a very long time to be by
So
yourself.
basically, this is what we were telling Cade, earlier in the week. We're telling him this was just a reboot of Walden's Pond by Henry David Thoreau. And so Jason is Henry David Thoreau. This is Walden, a visualized version of Walden. This is what happens if the writer of Walden gets on crack halfway through his visit to Walden Pond. That's what I'm getting.
A good theory.
All right.
Yeah,
That sounds great.
So who went down first? So we got Cade. Run down the actors in the movie for us.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few of them at the beginning, but I'll go ahead and dive in here.
Yeah.
Obviously, our main character here, Jenny Field, she's the kind of the final girl, the smart, really brave girl, which I was actually really impressed with her skills compared to
Her
our
character
other
was
final
deep,
girl.
a lot deeper than I realized before.
Yeah, she with what she does in the movie, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure. But I was impressed with what she did. She's played by Amy Steele, and the head counselor here. Obviously, we have another counselor. The head counselor obviously having a relationship with one of the counselors, Paul Holt, played by John Fury. Obviously, Alice makes an appearance back in this movie, so we see her for a little bit. But I'll go ahead and give a shout out to probably the best actress in the movie, Terry. Was played by Kristen Baker. A little fact about her is she was actually in the Waltons.
Really? As
Yeah.
one of the Waltons, or was she just in like one episode one time?
I got no idea which episode she was in, but she goes from being in the Waltons to just full on showing everything in this movie.
Yep.
So I thought that was kind of funny.
Got bills to
Right.
pay, baby. You got to make that money.
You
gotta make the
you gotta
money.
make it work. Yeah. And I guess the first, let's see. So we're going through the town there. We see Sandra and Jeff get in the town. His truck gets towed by his friend Ed, and then they all go to camp together. But I'm trying to think of when the first kill actually takes place, other than when Alice dies at the beginning of the movie.
Was it Crazy Ralph?
Yeah, it was. And
I guess-
he got killed on the
I
first
guess-
night. But I want to give a shout out to Ed. He is like my favorite character in this movie, and he lives.
Yeah.
He stays out with all the other camp counselors
Yeah.
in this big drinking party, and he actually survives the movie. Big goofy
Oh,
guy.
I didn't
You would've
know
thought that. Oh yeah, you would have thought that he would have got killed real quick, but no, he ended up surviving. And he ended up being in a couple of other movies from the 80s that I had watched when I was a kid too, and he always played the same type of character that he did in this movie. He was always like a prankster, and he always had like a joke that he was cracking or something. I always liked his characters that was in the movies. But Cade, you were asking about the first kill. So
Yeah.
a couple of things happen before this first kill, and one of the things that I want to note is that whenever Holt is giving his big speech for all the counselors and everything, there's like 16 or some odd people there. There's like a lot of them. Okay.
Ton.
And this is one of the few Friday the 13th movies to where if you look at the big picture and look at everybody as a whole, most of the people end up coming out of this alive. And I always thought that was an interesting kind of little statistic there. But Cade, the first guy that got killed was in fact Crazy Ralph. And
Yeah, and this man was just straight up stalking Jenny. And,
Yeah, he was a peeping Tom, son.
yeah. Well, so the only people that he even worried about warning was Jeff and Sandra back in the town, because they were talking to their buddy in the phone booth, and he just rolls up on them on his bicycle, and he was like, "I warned the others," and he rides off, and they're sitting there like, "What the crap just happened? Who is this weirdo?" Then they wind up making it to the camp, and then Jenny ends up passing him, which is kind of weird anyway, because that's a one-way kind of dirt road into Camp Packanack, which is where the training center was that all the people were at. And he was right there at the entrance of Packanack. So you would have thought that Jenny, seeing him on the side of the road would have been like, why is this dude way out here on a bicycle coming to see us or whatever, but she doesn't say a word. Doesn't say a word to anybody. And now he's like wandered around I guess for the rest of the day, because it's dark by the time he actually gets killed. And he gets killed with what looks like a bicycle chain while he's
It's like barbed wire, I think.
yeah.
It's
while,
one of
while
those
he's
saws. It's one of those saws. You know, if you ever get like a survival knife that's got the saw that you cut back and forth and they'll cut
That's
wood.
kind of what
yeah?
it looked
Okay.
like. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got the rings. It's got the rings on it, so that's what you would stick a stick in and go back and forth. But of course, Jason sticks a stick through it and starts twisting it. But yeah, that's what it was.
Well, he gets killed while he's totally creeping on Jenny and Paul there, and I guess
That
that's
was so
what
funny,
you get when
man.
you're a creeper in this movie.
It's peeping Tommen. Let's just call it what it is. It's peeping Tommen.
If you're peeping Tommen and you're not Jason, then you're going to get killed. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and I want to say, and I'll add this one thing. One thing I really liked about this movie compared to the first one, and Corky talked about this. Like when you think about like summertime, like summer camp, everybody getting together. This movie showed a lot more of them being like kind of like counselors,
Yeah.
and more like because obviously in the last movie it rains and stuff, and so they're kind of just like chilling inside. But this one had that really cool like summer vibe to it, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, let's talk about this for a minute. So 5 years earlier, we have this massacre at this camp, which we rename it Camp Blood now, right? So who thought it was a good idea to open up another camp right beside it?
I don't know, man.
And as a counselor, okay, if I'm a camp counselor and I get invited to this Camp Packanack, which is right beside Camp Blood, I'm not even going to be in the state of New Jersey, let alone Camp Packanack. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, hey man, do you want to train to be a camp counselor over here next to Camp Blood? And I'm going, no, I do not. I don't want to do that.
You guys say that. But you all would be the first people to be counselors at Camp Blood. I don't want to hear it. All of you guys would be counselors.
It depends on if Terry is going to be there. Like that's going to be a big selling point for a lot of people.
Terry and Muffin. Are you going to walk Muffin for her?
Hey, speaking of Muffin, man, here's some.
That dog survived.
Here's some more. Who Terry was Muffin's
Yeah.
owner, right? Well,
Yeah.
I also read something else. Somebody had said that Muffin was friends with Jason. But of course, it couldn't have been because Muffin didn't show up till Terry got there. But this guy was like, no, man, because, there's a point where Muffin walks up to Jason and just looks at him or whatever. And
Yeah.
But they're like, Muffin and Jason were working together to get these people killed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's pretty far out there, bro. I don't think Muffin was a killer with Jason.
There's a whole other conspiracy that's going to come to light whenever we start talking about Muffin. Because whenever Jeff and Sandra are going across the lake to go over to Camp Blood, they actually run up on a dead animal, which looks like a dog that looks just like Muffin, which is just seconds after Muffin walked up to Jason and was like, hey man, how's it going? So the general question there was, did Jason actually stomp Muffin's guts out and kill him, or kill her rather, or did Muffin in fact live? Because, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in the movie, but there's a point in the epilogue of this movie to where Muffin shows back up, but it's in another one of those dream sequences. So you don't know if Muffin is really alive or not. And that is one of the topics that I wanted to ask you guys about and get your opinions on whether or not you think Muffin lived or in fact was another casualty of Jason.
I had always taken it that Muffin lived, but that dog was there for some reason. So it may have been Muffin. I don't know. I'd always thought Muffin lived myself, but now that you say that was a dream sequence.
I recognize Cade. Cade had his hand up.
Personally, I think that the dog was Pennywise from Derry, because Pennywise can shapeshift.
I didn't see no turtles out there, man.
No, that dog got curb stomped, and there's no other animal that would be out there in the forest, because it literally was the dog.
Yeah, you're right. It had to be Muffin, but
because where else would you just have an animal that
somebody's
would look
trap
like that?
door just opened?
That's mine. My bad. My bad.
So, but it's weird to think that the dog would be like a spirit, like I don't know. That was just weird to me.
So I looked it up, and I didn't look it up specifically for this podcast, but I have looked it up in the past. And the general consensus for it is actually split depending on whose website you're looking at. So a lot of people, I tend to, because I don't want Muffin to die. I think
No,
Muffin
Muffin's got to live, man.
Yeah, I'm Team Muffin. Okay, I'm pro Muffin. So I've always said that Muffin lived, and my proof was Muffin shows up at the end of the movie. However, there is a dog that looks just like Muffin that was gut stomped. There's no other dogs that look like Muffin that's hanging out in the woods, especially over there. The part that Muffin shows up in is a dream sequence. So there is some validity to the people who are not Team Muffin. However, because I am a dog lover, I can't be having nothing happen to Muffin. So I'm going to go ahead and say Muffin lives. I'd get it put on a t-shirt. I don't care. Muffin
I
lives.
would say in reality, Jason is probably about like Michael Myers. Muffin was probably a midnight snack after he got done stomping him, you know?
And you're probably right, honestly. or else they wouldn't have put
especially after
they wouldn't even had that scene in there.
Yeah, yeah. So this takes place the day after Crazy Ralph gets it at the tree there. This takes place when Jeff and Sandra are trying to sneak off to Camp Blood. That's when they run up on the dog. And they get caught by the sheriff or the deputy of the town. And he's like, I can't be having y'all out here in these woods trying to go to Camp Blood and getting all that stirred up again. So he takes them back. And the guy's like, are you not going to discipline these people? And he's like, no, they can't have no sitting seconds on dessert or something like that.
Seconds on dessert.
Yeah.
He was just being
like,
a
oh
prick, man. And I never understood that because, okay, if you're Holt, which is the guy that runs that, and the sheriff or the deputy, whoever it is, brings in two of your young people and tells you that they were about to go over to Camp Blood, I'm going to go ahead and like get on to the kids for doing that, because there's a pretty good chance that the same thing that happened at Camp Blood is going to happen at Camp Packanack.
Yeah.
And I'm going to need that support from the local police force. And I'm not going to piss those guys off for no good reason. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's
But
literally
now
the
that's
first
just me.
camp. Yeah, you're right. It's like the first camp that had been going on since what happened like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I would at
So,
least
like,
set
at
them
Crystal
down and
Lake.
I would have been like, look, man, I got this land cheap because it's next to Camp Blood.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people told me to not build another summer camp. It's too close to Camp Blood. But I'm like, I got this land cheap. So I don't need y'all stirring up no more Camp Blood rumors, okay? Stay out of there because I don't need this happening. You know, my enrollment's going to drop when people find out I built the camp right beside Camp Blood, you know?
And yeah, because this is before the internet, so people can't research that and be like, oh, that's right next to Camp Blood. No, they're going to send their kids and they're not going to know, you know.
Yeah.
But I would definitely not give them seconds on dessert.
No, they ain't. I probably wouldn't even give them no dessert, period, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to try to go over there to Camp Blood, you can hang it up, man. Forget it.
Yeah, you're stupid for wanting to go over there anyway.
Yeah, no doubt.
I want to freaking see that. Like, what the heck?
I mean,
man?
Kevin Bacon's already dead, right? So just forget it.
Him and his Speedo, you know?
He should have lived.
So after, you know, he tells the sheriff guy that they're not going to get no seconds on dessert, he goes back in there and tells them all, you know what, this is going to be your last night before all the kids show up tomorrow. So anybody wants to go to town, you know, you need to go to town and live it up. And I think a few of them go to town, but what's the guy's name in the wheelchair? Mark. He stays.
My boy.
Of course, Jeff and the pedophile Jeff and Sandra stay, you know, because
Yeah,
she's still
right.
the 17-year-old girl. And one of the funniest, who was the chick that was hitting on old Mark there, wanting to play video games with him?
Yeah, she was hard she was wanting him pretty bad,
She
man.
was-
She had like a kink.
Yeah, she must have been because, she asked him, she says, does everything work? And he's like, well, yeah. And she said, well, all I need is your fingers, and pulls out 2 video games, you know.
I mean,
She was wanting some
She
of
had
that
some kinda-
paraplegic stuff, man.
her name was Vicky.
Yeah, she was definitely trying to throw the hints to him, and finally,
All right, I'm gonna skip ahead just a few scenes because now that we're talking about Vicky, right? So she's sitting there with, who'd you say his name was? Dave or Mark. Okay.
Yeah.
So Vicky and Dave are sitting there, and they're sitting there playing the hockey game, right? And then she says, you want to go to your cabin or mine? He was like, well, there's somebody else in mine. And then she was like, well, it's a big place. We can go find us somewhere. And she says, I'll be right back. Well, you never say I'll be right back in a horror movie, but she
was done. She was done at that point,
She goes back to her cabin, and she's going to try to put on something sexy for him, right? All right. So she takes off the sexy black panties that she was wearing to begin with and puts on these doo-doo brown looking panties.
Yeah.
That's like
the duty panties.
That was like the most unsexy panties I've ever seen in my life. Puts these things on. And then she had to go back to her car to get the hairbrush.
You're forgetting something.
What happened?
She sprayed herself in the crotch with perfume.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because obviously she's a little self-conscious. She's a little self-conscious about that, And she thinks, like, if she thinks that she needs that, maybe Mark can do better,
Yeah.
And apparently Mark started a new exercise program to cure himself of being paralyzed.
Right. He says the medical professionals say that I'll never walk again, but I can beat it.
Bro, I'm gonna do some pull-ups.
I can beat it.
Get these legs working.
I can will myself to walk. I don't have any nervous, connection to my legs anymore.
Funny.
But I can just will myself to walk. We'll be okay.
Hey,
Literally.
He's got people putting on duty brown panties for him, so he knows.
That's right, man. That's right, man.
That's exactly.
She takes off the sexy black panties and she puts on the doo-doo brown panties, and she's ready for a big old night, man. She's ready to party.
Now, I think we're skipping over one of the best scenes in the movie.
We skip.
I will go ahead and let you break this down, Cade.
All right, I'm gonna set the scene. The moon is cascading over the water of the lake. I'm just kidding. No, we obviously see old Terry there. She decides she's gonna go on a walk after everybody goes out to the bar. So she says, and when I go on walks and I see a body of water, I frequently want to take my clothes off and get in there.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
just out of the blue. Yeah.
Let's just, let's just see. Let's just
Why
cool
not?
off a little bit. Had a long day.
Why not?
And obviously, old Scott, this guy's been hitting her the whole movie. He says, "Listen, honey," I don't think he says this. "Listen, honey, get that water. Let's go." And that doesn't happen, but essentially they walk off because he steals her shirt or pants.
He steals her clothes.
And then this man gets, and then freaking like Home Alone booby trap style, like Jason sets up a rope and pulls Scott up, and she just walks off and tells him like, "Hey, don't move."
Yeah. And just let him hanging there,
And then we see him get his throat gets cut, and then Terry, honestly, with her conspiracy theories about the dog, I think maybe Jason lets her live. I'm just kidding.
Terry?
I think she dies. No, she dies.
Well, all right. So whenever Scott, which is hanging upside down in the Home Alone trap thing,
snare trap,
snare trap, Jason actually cuts his throat with the wrong end of the machete.
Yes.
And it's very obvious that it is the wrong end of the machete. But it happened. And I guess due to low budgetness and time constraints, money constraints, they didn't want to have to reshoot it or whatever. They left it in. And I'm pretty sure that the special effects guy, which I don't think was Tom Savini in this.
It was not.
But I'm pretty sure that the special effects guy even made mention of, we used the wrong side of the machete and we just didn't catch it.
I'll say this, though. That was a very good scene, man. He was actually gurgling his own blood and stuff. I thought, other than using the wrong end of the knife, I thought they done good on that scene. It was a very good scene. How Jason knew to set a trap for him like that. Maybe he's trapping deer and stuff like that. But
well, so he thought that it was Paul.
Well, before we go too far past this scene, I just wanted to point out, this is for all of our viewers that have listened to our previous episodes. It's a tradition. Cade always finds the butt cracks in these movies. and he's like gravitated. It's like a magnet, He's gravitated to the butt crack.
It's true.
He found the butt crack, and he's drawn to it. It's crazy. This was the butt crack scene of Friday the 13th. Part 2.
Now, if he could just find him a naked old woman in here, he'd be all right.
Yeah, man. We need some werewolf
that was going to
nipples.
happen. As soon as I saw that guy slingshot and Scott, he shot a slingshot at Terry's butt. I was like, this could show some promise. There could not be an old naked woman in this movie.
Yeah,
and there was not. Terry ended up getting naked.
And there wasn't.
And back in 1981, whenever this movie come out, or 82, I think it come out in 81. Pretty sure. I was 2 years old, so I'd have been like, "Yeah, that's cool. I'll watch it."
Came out in 81.
I was -19.
I was 2 years old.
I was 3. I don't think I made it to the theater release on this one.
I did not make it to the theater release.
They may have taken me to the drive-in. Who knows?
I do remember watching this movie because, see, when I was a kid, I know that I joke about this all the time, but it really is true. When I was a kid, I could watch any movie that I wanted to, regardless of gore, regardless of like violence, regardless of the language. I could even watch stuff that had partial, nudity, like this scene here. The only thing that I was not allowed to watch was a full-on love scene. And even then, I could watch the movie. I just had to turn my head during the love scene. Because I know that I saw Friday the 13th Part 2 probably when I was 5 or 6 years old for the first time. I know that for a fact because
my mom let me watch Cheech and Chong growing up when I was 3 or 4 years old.
And that is awesome. I mean, that's the difference.
There was no filter, dude.
That's the difference, Cade and Brent, between just the general times of growing up in the 80s and growing up in the early 2000s whenever you guys grew up. That's the difference.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me when I was about 11 years old, and I convinced my mom and dad to get me GTA 4, and they specifically sat me down and said, "Listen, you cannot go in any strip clubs." And I said, "All right." So I boot up that game,
and that's the first thing that you did.
And Liberty City, and I see a strip club, and I just walk in there, and I have a RPG, and I just blow up everybody.
You know how I validated playing that game, letting my kids play that game growing up? I told them, Father of the Year here, I told them, I said, you can play the game, but you have to turn the sound down. They couldn't have any sound.
Hear people screaming as they're on fire.
Yeah, and all the...
When I was growing up, I mean, it's not too... Dad basically let us watch whatever we wanted to. It's kind of the same, but, I'm sure there was more... I'm sure it was a little bit more strict than what his parents were, but not much. I mean, we could watch whatever we wanted. But one thing that's weird, though, when it came to Grand Theft Auto, I don't know why, because I know that they had never played the game. They had never played the game. They may have heard... I'm assuming Dad may have heard about someone talking about it at work or something. But the only strict rule that I ever had was I could not play Grand Theft Auto. And I have no idea. I could watch pretty much any movie or whatever. But Grand Theft Auto, I'm assuming he heard someone at work talk about strip clubs and all sorts of stuff. So he just did not let me play that game.
He probably heard me talking about it because I played it religiously.
I was like, hey, man, if Corky is playing this game, then my kids don't need to be playing it, man.
Yeah.
What happened?
But
so yeah, I guess after this goes down, we end up getting a scene with what that where Jeff and Sandra get involved.
Well,
they're all kind of
talking. You've got dude gets killed with the wrong end of the machete while he's hanging up.
After the snare trap, we get Mark taking a machete to the head.
So she comes back. What's her face comes back.
Yeah.
And then she actually gets killed off screen because you see her. Yeah.
Terry. She gets killed.
Terry's
off screen.
Standing there, and Steve or whatever that guy's name is still hanging there, and he's dead, but he's got his back to her. So she spins him around and sees where he's been killed. And then she screams, turns around, and then she sees Jason, but you're looking through Jason's eyes.
Right.
And and then it just cuts back to Paul and Jenny back at the bar. And you've got some dude that, for some reason, the dude at the bar that's playing the guitar reminds me of how my dad used to act. So he starts playing this guitar and he's all hopping around and he's like this right here. And I'm like, that's my dad. Like, yes, that's exactly what he would be doing. And if he could play a guitar, if he was that talented, he would be playing at a bar like that. You know, that's
Probably
how
at the
he
county
rolled.
line.
Yeah, that's how he rolled. Terry dies, and then it goes to the next scene, and you've got Paul and Jenny, and that's where Jenny ends up going into her big, long, in-depth study of how Jason was this scared, kind of kid that was living in the woods, that didn't know anything, didn't know any better. And then he sees his mom get killed, and then he's traumatized. She's very
let's
sympathetic.
talk about Jenny for a minute.
She's
know
very
why she's
sympathetic.
sympathetic? Because she's taking child psychology in college at this point.
Yep.
And which
I'm not
explains a
saying that.
lot about, some of the stuff she done at the end of the movie. Maybe that's why she thought to do those things. I didn't realize that until I was studying for this podcast. But yeah, was a child psychologist in college, and that's why she was probably, really into Jason and thinking about why he done the things he done and whatever it is that he's doing. Because, what's the main guy's name? The main counselor?
Paul.
Paul.
Let me give it to you straight about Jason, the guy.
Yeah. Paul.
So he got everybody thinking about Jason, and of course, and she takes it to another level because she kind of knows what she's talking about, But
so that's actually a really good insight because
yeah,
the only time that I remember even her being mentioned to have been taking these classes was whenever her and Paul was talking whenever she first showed up at Camp Hackinack and he had to come fix her car. And so
first off, hold on. Let me stop you for a second. He does not fix her car. He goes over there, looks at the car, and says, "Try it again." And then it just fires right up.
Right
in his face.
He done absolutely nothing to the car, but look
that
at
is
it,
true.
and it starts
because
right there.
I actually made fun of that last night, and that is true. But that is where he mentions her taking these child psychology classes, and that's really good insight, Corky, because I had never put two and two together like that.
Me neither.
I had never done that, so that's kudos, man. That's a pretty good observation.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. We done an episode where we ranked the final girls, and I'm kind of thinking now I'm glad that because we had sound problems and didn't get to post it. But one of these days we're going to redo that show, and Jenny's going to be somewhere in my top five because she's smart.
She's good.
Jenny was already my number 2. If you remember.
Okay.
Yes.
She wasn't even in my top 5, but I can't. Yeah, mine's going to change
Jenny
now.
was my number 2.
Yeah, she's pretty bad, man, and smart. That's what I like about her. Now that I've looked into it this deep,
Yeah.
So where are we at now? Who just died?
They're at the bar, and while they're at the bar is actually where we get the deaths of the other counselors. So you've got Sandra and you've got Jeff. Obviously, we talked about their scene a little earlier, how they get impaled, which was kind of even though a lot of that stuff got cut, I thought that was a really brutal scene because that man drove that stake through both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was still very
crazy.
brutal.
Yeah, super brutal. And then obviously we have the wheelchair, Mr. Mark there, Mr. Player.
Super wheels.
He goes out looking for Vicky, I guess. He thinks that he hears her, and he goes out there, and Jason just obviously has no sympathy for people. That man just freaking gets macheted in the face.
That was a brutal death.
And then you see his body ragdoll down the stairs, and I actually laughed a little bit. Maybe that's messed up, but
well, okay, so that's the difference between watching it as an adult and watching it when you're too young to be watching it, because in the rain with how that scene is, in the rain, he's actually bouncing down the steps in the wheelchair, got the machete to the face, you got the lights, you got the rain. That scene right there, when I was a kid, scared the ever living, crap out of me.
Yeah.
When I was a kid. That I was like closing my eyes during the scene and everything.
Yeah.
And so
the
now
same thing
as an adult, I'm watching it and I'm laughing my butt off because I see the absurdity of it.
Well, I'd kind of like to know how they done the scene. Was that a dummy in the wheelchair or back in those days where they just like, you're going for a ride, bud?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If I was a stunt man, I'm not gonna get pushed down steps backwards.
You think
Backwards?
you think they seatbelt? You think they wrap someone up and like protection and push them down a stairwell?
I'm not gonna be Mr. X over here and be like, okay,
Yeah.
see ya,
Yeah.
see you down there at the bottom there, buddy.
Yeah, Brent. They're like, we don't have the budget for like a mannequin, so you got to take them for the team, brother. We got to make this look real. They just push them down the stairs. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, hold on, I ain't ready, man.
But yeah, man, with as silly and as funny is what that scene is. That scene scared the dog out of me when I was a kid. It did.
When I would think about
of me.
this movie, when I would think about Friday the 13th Part 2, that's always the scene I would think about, is him getting hit in the face with that machete and going backwards down the steps. So I'm the same way.
And then because I'm a little kid, I'm going, man, Jason killed that handicapped guy and pushed him down the
He's a jerk.
steps. So you know,
he's
so
brutal.
you know he's gonna kill me. You know, that's what I was thinking.
Nobody's safe, man. That's why that dog got curb stomped.
Nobody's safe.
Got in his way.
Because I had my grandfather's brother was an invalid and he was in a wheelchair for his whole life. And I was thinking to myself, man, that's
Dude,
just like my
since
uncle.
when do you call people in wheelchairs invalids? Come on, dude.
I'm just
What
saying,
does that mean, Daniel?
I'm
Go
just
on,
saying,
dude.
bro,
Since the Texas
you-
Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Hold
Wait a
on.
minute. Now,
What is invalid?
Invalid brother. Come on, dude.
Hold on, because you're gonna get some handicapped people that's gonna give us some bad comments at the end of this.
They didn't teach me this at Central.
I'm just saying. My grandfather's brother was born.
My uncle was an
Wait,
invalid.
Time out. My grandfather's brother was born very, very handicapped. Okay, his feet were completely turned around backwards. He was born with no knees. Like he was really bad shape and went through a lot of different surgeries and stuff. So he was very much an invalid.
He was mean.
I've never heard this.
Well, he didn't like some people. That's true.
That's
didn't
I'm gonna
like
start.
me.
Is this an
He
offensive
didn't
word?
like-
Can I use
He
it?
didn't like nobody. He didn't like none of my friends.
Can I start calling people this, or is that offensive? Because I'll start using it
Man,
to sound.
Kate, I
intelligent.
want you to
Honestly,
go the next person at Walmart in a wheelchair you see, say, hello, my invalid friend. Just say that.
no.
Yeah,
Man,
and then kick them down the stairs.
you're going to get us kicked off of YouTube, son. I'm not saying.
Hi,
I'm
Eric.
not making
Dude, you're the
fun.
one that called your uncle an invalid.
First
You
off,
said it, dang it.
First off, let me mount the apology right now. I do not mean to belittle people that are
Guys,
handicapped.
listen, if
in
you're
any
an
way.
invalid, I meant no offense if you're an invalid. I
meant,
didn't mean
if you are a handicapped
offense.
person, I meant no offense. Corky, you're gonna
All I
have to
meant
edit. Corky's
from
gonna have to
uncle,
edit this whole thing
let's
out.
go.
I'm not even smart enough to know what that word means, so I can't get offended.
Corky's gonna have to edit this whole segment out
All
at
I
this
meant-
point.
My uncle was messed up, so if you're an invalid like he was, then it's
Man.
okay. I mean, no apologies to all my invalid fans, all my invalid
Man.
listeners.
This has sparked a really big flame here.
Man, we're
I
gonna
like
get some bad comments off of that, and I didn't even mean to. Thanks, son.
Hey,
Just for the record, we mean no harm to anybody that may be in a wheelchair. We love you guys.
That's
But
right.
No,
anyhow,
unless
You can
Jason
get,
does,
get
though.
killed by
Jason does
just
not
as
care.
well as I can.
You better watch
Jason,
out. Stay away.
Jason will kill you
Stay away from-
just as well. He would kill you just as hard.
If your legs don't work, you still dying, so it's all good.
You
He
still,
don't care how hard you've been. He don't care how hard you've been training to. He don't care. He's gonna kick you down the
yeah,
stairs.
he don't care that you're in training. Okay, so Mark gets the machete to the face on the porch. Okay, so now you've got Steve and Sandra that's still upstairs that are being pedophiles.
Ed,
And then you've got Vicky that's still alive. So what happens after Jason pushes him down the stairs? Then he walks up the stairs in the cabin and he stabs. He actually gets a 2 for here, 2 for 1. He stabs both people.
Yes.
Actually kills an underage girl. I did not realize that she was 17. So
She was
he actually
17.
kills-
They didn't realize it either because, like I was saying, the scene involved full frontal nudity as well. So, yeah, they had to Get rid of all that.
But anyway, he stabs both of them, so that's 2 for 1 kill. That leaves Vicky, the only person left alive at the camp while everybody else is out drinking. So you flip over back to the bar, and you've got Paul and Jenny that is about to leave and go back to the camp. They're talking to their goofy buddy that's always playing the pranks. I can't remember what his name is. But they're talking to him, and they're like, hey, come back to the camp whenever this place closes. And he was like, okay, boss, okay. And then they leave, and then the first thing that he does, now I think this is kind of cool anyway, but the first thing that he does after his boss leaves is ask one of the locals, hey, is there any after-hours joints around here? And then the guy was like, oh, yeah, sure. And he was like, all right. So
he saved his life doing that.
You know that him and the other 6 people that are with him in the truck, they ain't going nowhere. They ain't coming back. They're going to stay out drinking.
Having a good time.
And Paul and Jenny are on the way. Flips back to the camp, and now you've got Vicky, which is actually, this scene gets played in a lot of the montages in some later movies. In some of the later movies, I think starting with maybe part 6 or part 7, they'll play a bunch of different clips from the different movies, and they'll just make a montage of nothing but Jason killing people. And this scene is actually one of them, where he pops up out of the bed, and he's got the knife, and the camera's showing the knife, shows her kind of swatting the knife away like she's going to do something, and he stabs her. So now Vicky's out of the picture, and you've got Paul and Jenny that wind up rolling up to the camp. And that's kind of where the movie is at this point here. The rain has stopped. And it's no longer storming.
Is this a good point to guess the killer?
Do you guys want to guess the killer this week?
I'm down. Working real hard.
I'm down.
All right. So everybody knows a new thing we've started doing each week is called Guess the Kill Scene. I'm going to play a clip of a kill scene, and we'll see which one of you guys can figure it out. And I've decided, when we first started, the kill scenes were going to be from any horror movie, but to narrow it down, going forward, the kill scenes will come from the movie we're reviewing. So, without further ado, here comes the scene. When it gets done playing, you guys tell me what you think it was. All right, what do you think it is? Okay. Go.
I think that the scene was Mark.
That is.
As do I.
Yeah.
I think that the scene.
All I wanted to say is I've got that written down on my post-it note right here. I knew that as well.
I
Good
knew
job.
it too. It was Mark.
Good job. Well, for the first time, you guys actually guessed the kill scene, so good job. All right.
I feel so good.
Moving on, we've got Jenny, and who's the guy she with? I can't remember his name
Paul.
for nothing.
Paul.
Jenny and Paul. They come back to the campground, and they find all the carnage has happened, and that's where we're at. So, or did I just skip?
So they find Sandra and Jeff taken out upstairs, all the blood, and then they kind of go on a little bit of a chase here. I think, let's see, Jason breaks into the house. He actually gets into a little bit of an altercation with our main man. What's his name? Paul? Yep, Paul. Make sure I got that right. And while this is happening, and while he's literally fighting Jason's on top of him. This is the only time where I was kind of like, okay, is Jenny about to be a terrible final girl here? Because she's sitting there, like, saying, like, Paul, and she can clearly see him, like, getting strangled by Jason. Like, why don't you go and, like, throw something at him to, like, help him? So she, like, skirts away. We kind of assume that maybe Paul died there, but this kind of sparks, Jenny becoming sort of like a bad A. She's starting to kick some butt and actually holds her own against Jason here, and they kind of scramble around the camp and eventually make it back to the shed. I guess kind of a good summary there.
Yeah, and when she gets in the shed, of course, she knows the lore of Jason because they all talked about it at the first of the movie. when he said, you know, he watched his mother get decapitated, and that's what drove him crazy. So she finds the shed, and she goes in there, and she sees an altar Jason has made. It's got, you know, his mom's sweater, and actually her head there is surrounded by candles. And this is one of the reasons why I have recalibrated my final girl count, because I think this puts Jenny on a whole new level, because as we said before, she's studying child psychology. She knows Jason's got mother issues. He watched his mom die, and, you know, he's actually drove him crazy. So she actually thinks to put on his mother's sweater, and actually, you know, she stands in front of the decapitated head, and she's looking at Jason, and she starts taking on the persona of his mother, and it actually works for a couple seconds, you know, until she steps to the side and he sees the decapitated head. But that is very smart on her, you know, on her part, because, you know, only somebody that's studying psychology would probably think about something like that. But yeah, that's her being able to think like that's probably what helped get her through this movie. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Brent.
Well, she has to be one of the first final girls, or one of the first and only final girls in any horror movie to actually outsmart the killer. Like, I can't think of very many. You could say maybe
Nancy.
Some of the Scream. Yeah, Nancy, maybe. But, I mean, she's one of the first and only final girls to outsmart a killer. And to outsmart Jason, I mean, he's not the smartest of the slasher villains, but at the same time, he just brutalizes everyone he comes into contact with. And she outsmarts him there at the end. So, yeah, I mean, I give her a lot of credit. And that's a really cool scene.
Yeah, and I'll backtrack. She kicked him in the nuts. And I forgot to mention that when I was giving the summary, but I was like, "You go, girl." I was like,
What'd she do? She took the machete and chopped him in the arm with it, didn't she? Is that what she done?
She chopped him in the shoulder. She chopped him in the shoulder.
Yeah, in the shoulder.
Yeah.
Looks like, or I thought it was the back of the neck.
So,
could have been the shoulder.
Kudos to Jenny for kicking Jason in the nuts. And this is like this is before zombie Jason shows up. Zombie Jason doesn't show up until part 6. And so there's actually a scene in either part 6, 7, or 8, one of those three, to where somebody actually tries to kick him in the nuts and it doesn't do anything. But in this one, because he's still human, when she kicks him in the nuts, he actually feels it. I want to jump back real quick, and Cage, you might have already covered this, and I just missed it, but I'll jump back real quick to where Jason's chasing her. It's after he has incapacitated Paul. He's chasing her around, and she runs into a cabin, and she's hiding under the bed. It's where the rat comes out. And so she thinks that Jason has walked back out, right? But when she crawls out of the bed, Jason is actually standing on a chair, and before he's able to kill her, the chair breaks, and he actually falls down. So
she peed on herself,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, she actually peed on herself. And that was Jason standing on the chair and the chair breaking. That was some comic gold right there.
It was
normally
Jason
Jason
was supposed to happen, and they just left it in there.
I don't know, but normally Jason is not going to, blooper himself while he is in attack mode. So, yeah, there was that. You also discover that he is, this is when he kills Vicky. You also discover that Jason is actually in a white potato sack mask.
It was actually a pillowcase. I didn't realize.
Was it a pillowcase? Okay, so he's actually got
call it a pillowcase. I always call it a burlap sack.
Yeah, I thought it was just like a potato sack or something. Okay.
Yeah, but, again, studying for this podcast, it was a white pillowcase.
So it was a white pillowcase that Jason...
Which, now this is a whole nother podcast. I kind of think that's one of those Mandela effects, man, because coming up, it was a burlap sack, in my opinion. Now, all of a sudden, it's changed to a pillowcase. No, I don't think so, man. But that's for another podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Well, what's crazy for me, and I don't know if this is Brent's first time watching it, but when you think of Jason, obviously you think of his iconic hockey mask, and I've learned from you guys. Obviously, I believe in part 3 is when he obtains this, but it's kind of crazy going back in the first 2 movies in this franchise. He's not in his iconic hockey mask. He's not even in the first movie. I think that's a pretty cool fact, and I didn't even really know that before we started.
I'll add this in. I'll add this in because usually slashers don't run. In part 2 and part 4, Jason runs. He does not walk. He actually runs, and usually that doesn't happen.
Well, another thing, when they came out with this movie, Jason was never really supposed to be a part of it. When we talk about how they copied Halloween, they were going to do with the Friday the 13th series the same thing they tried to do with Halloween Part 3. They were going to make this an anthology where every movie was about something different, And I reckon whoever had the money in the right place at the right time come back and said, no, we need this to be Jason to be the killer. So they changed it up at the last minute. But the working, idea for this movie was going to be they were going to start this new anthology series where they would come out with a movie every year, every 2 years, but it would be a different story. Just like they attempted with Halloween 3, but neither one of those would have worked, in my opinion. I think they made the right move bringing Jason back.
Honestly, and this is off topic, and this is going to be something for another podcast, but I do disagree with you on that point solely from the aspect of it wasn't marketed right. So Halloween 3 failed.
Halloween 3
failed at the time because it was marketed like Michael Myers was going to be in it, and everybody expected Michael Myers to be in it.
And let me say this, Halloween 3 is a great movie.
It is.
Love it. I don't care what people say.
It really is a very good movie. I love Halloween 3. Now, when I was a kid, for a long time, I hated Halloween 3 for all the wrong reasons. And it was because Michael Myers wasn't in it. And now, when you go back and you watch Halloween 3 for what it is, it's a really cool Halloween-themed movie. But like I said...
Yeah, it's a very good movie.
We're gonna go ahead and get back on to the topic for this one.
Well, hey, speaking of topic, do you got some trivia questions this week?
Yeah. I didn't know if we were gonna sum up the movie first and do trivia last, or if you want to.
Well, let's go ahead and kick his trivia off. Yeah, we'll do trivia and then we'll sum it up and rank it. How about that?
All right, I love it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so trivia tonight comes from Friday the 13th, Part 2. And question number 1, we'll just go ahead and get right in it. What is the kid singing at the beginning of the movie? What song? Go ahead.
Itsy Bitsy Spider. Yay. Get on my lap.
Hey, I couldn't tell because my version was in Spanish.
Yeah, it was the Spanish, so I had no idea what was happening.
Y'all are gonna have to, I'm sorry for you. You're going to have to stop watching Spanish editions of these movies. But Corky's on fire already coming out of the gate.
Yes.
Guns blaring.
Dang it, man.
Guns blaring, both barrels. Here we go. Question number 2. Okay, Corky, you're probably going to get stumped on this. If you get this one, I'm just going to hang it up. Question number 2. What is written on the side of the hood on the truck when they drive it through town?
Cade,
go.
Outlaws 2? Or Outlaws?
Outlaw 2. Cade with the point. He coming out strong.
I'm coming.
Man, he's watching the Spanish version. It probably, Banderos or something.
Nah, I told myself that you would ask that question.
Yeah, you got to start watching
I made
a
mental note.
The paint,
color
of the third car in the background.
That's right.
Kevin Bacon's like Speedo color.
That's right. You got to start watching for stuff like that for my questions. Okay, now here's an interesting one. Okay, question number 3. Okay, what is the total kill count at the end of the movie for confirmed kills in this movie? Go. Cade.
10.
No.
9.
Corky got it right. It is 9. 9.
Are you serious?
9 confirmed.
Dang it, man.
From the time
Are you freaking kidding me?
that Alice gets killed in her apartment, counting as 1, all the way until the final death, and I'm wanting to say the final death was Vicky. There are 9. There are 9 total kills. Okay. Question number 4.
That's crazy.
Okay. What was written on the mirror when Jenny wakes up?
Red rum.
Anybody want to hazard a guess?
Oh my gosh.
Anybody want to hazard a guess?
I have no idea.
Cade.
Go ahead, Cade.
Was it Jason?
No. So you got to remember. This is the
Wait, when Jenny wakes
This is the beginning scene on day 2. So Jenny wakes up after she has slept with Paul on night 1, after
Corky.
dude gets killed. Go ahead, Corky.
Watch out for bears.
Beware of bears. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because they were talking about bears. This is bear country and all this.
Dadgum.
Okay, so where are we at score wise? I hadn't been keeping score. My bad.
I've got 1. Corky's got
2.
what, 2 or 3?
Corky got 2.
I got 3.
Well, you've got 3.
He's
You got
got
Itsy
3, 'cause
Bitsy
he got
Spider.
He got
You got 9 confirmed kills
kill
9.
count.
and beware
And
bears. So there's 3-1. Brent, where you at, son?
Hey, for this
Man.
last one, I was gonna guess beware. Would that have counted?
No. Man, I'm telling you, no son of mine should have no idea about this movie. You should be getting all these questions right. You should have been watching this movie since you were 3 years old, son.
My verse was in Spanish. What
You
can I
have
say?
disappointed me. You have disappointed me.
I can tell you what he was singing in Spanish.
All right, so this is going to be harder because you guys haven't seen it. Corky has, but you guys probably haven't seen it, so you're not going to be able to put this together. But I'm going to go ahead and ask the question anyway because I thought of it, and it was cool. So what kill is very similar to a kill in Halloween 2, and why?
Man, that's a broad
Cade?
question.
But if you're paying attention,
Cade?
go ahead, Cade.
Is it the death of Sandra and?
No.
Okay, never mind then.
I don't know, Daniel. What is it?
Okay, so it is very similar to the kill in Halloween 2 whenever the cop gets killed with a hammer to the head. Because in Halloween 2, Mr. Garrett, which is an authority figure wearing a uniform, he's a security guard at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, goes to find out why the phones are dead, and Michael Myers kills him with a hammer to the head.
Yep.
Dang.
So
Didn't
those
even
are
think about that one.
those are similar. I thought that was pretty cool whenever I was watching it, and I was like, yeah, they're not going to get this one.
That's a good question though.
So
Yeah, that was a good question.
So that brings me up to the last question. So Corky wins the night because there's no way that Brent and Cade can catch him. But
According to math, I win. Yes.
so the last
I
question,
think winner takes all on this question.
and
right
you've
here.
got to
I think so.
be paying attention, okay? But what pinball machine was shown in the background at the bar?
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Serious?
I seen it and I was like, oh, that's a question right there. I
Are
got
you
it.
serious?
I got it. Boom.
I got
to be paying attention when you're gonna mess with my trivia questions.
All right, what is it?
I have no idea.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
you
I
guys
really
give
Can't
up?
even guess.
It is
Probably Elvira or something.
It is
like
the Kiss pinball machine.
that. Oh, the classic.
Dude, that was one of the guesses in my head.
You should have
Well,
rang
Brent
in,
gets
son.
Brent gets a
You
half
should have
point.
rang in.
I could have said Kiss. I could have said Ninja Turtles.
So, all right, Cade, go ahead and finish out the movie for us because there's only just a handful of scenes left, and then we'll go ahead. We'll have another Muffin talk, and then we'll proceed from there.
We'll give our rating stuff. So obviously, the last thing we talked about, Jenny ends up stabbing Jason here. Paul, comes to save her as she does a stellar performance imitating Jason's mom. You see her actually convince him, and then he obviously realizes, okay, this is not my mom. But they make it out of there, and at first I thought they were gonna like straight up just leave, but they go inside the house to try to just I guess calm down a little bit. And much like what happened in part 1, everything seems like it's all happy, and the uplifting music plays, and I'm sitting there like, well, dang, man,
Something's
we
coming.
go.
Yeah.
Something's coming, and she's sitting there, I guess like on the couch, and then all of a sudden the man himself jumps through the window at her, and this is actually where you get to see Jason without his pillowcase, whatever he was wearing on his head, and essentially the monster from the Goonies is coming up on him here, and attacks him. Now I want to say. What happens after this point? This isn't where she stabs him, right? This is how do they end up getting out of this?
Actually, this is a dream sequence.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
she's
okay,
already
that's right,
she's
that's
already
right.
And
stabbed
Muffin
him.
is there.
Yeah. So she's already stabbed him with the or sliced him with the machete through the shoulder.
And he's incapacitated.
Made it back to the cabin. You don't know if Paul is even still alive or not. You don't even know because Paul shows up.
That's right.
Paul shows up, but Paul is in the cabin and he opens up the door for Muffin to come through, which that whole sequence turns into a dream sequence. So you don't know when that dream sequence actually starts. Did Paul show up at Jason's house in the woods and save her, or did she slash Jason on her own and then crawl back to the cabin on her own? We don't know that because we don't know where that dream sequence starts. But we do know at this point that it is a dream sequence. Muffin comes through the door. You've got the nice music going. And then all of a sudden, Sloth from the Goonies jumps through the window and drags her through the window. And then everything cuts to the next day, and they're loading Jenny into the ambulance. And at that point, she is actually calling for Paul, and nobody gives her a reply. So we still don't know.
That's interesting. I never put that together. Yep.
We still don't know if Paul is actually alive. Now, because I'm
saying he's dead.
Well, because
don't spoil it.
Muffin. I'm saying Muffin's alive. So if I'm saying Muffin's alive, then I'm saying that Paul has to be alive. But there are a lot of other valid points that people are making online that's saying, nope, that was a dream sequence and Paul actually was killed by Jason in the cabin.
Yeah.
And
that's
Muffin
that would make no sense.
Had Muffin's gut stomped out in the woods.
Yeah, because you have to think it like this. If Jason gets his hands on you, why would he not kill you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah, Paul's dead, and she's the only one that lived, and that was her brain making a scenario to where some good things were coming to be with her, you know, to try to keep her sane, I guess, you know.
And this may backtrack a little bit, but was essentially Jason, like, sacrificing these people for Miss Voorhees there? Because you see the corpses of some of these counselors and some people he's killed around her.
Alice from part one there, briefly.
Yeah,
Alice is in there. You've got Muffin's owner, what's her face, with all of her nakedness that she had going on.
Oh, Cade knows who it is.
Who is that, Cade?
Started on Terry.
Terry. See, Cade's woman, Terry, is in there. She's actually in there several times. You've got Mrs. Voorhees' 5-year-old rotted head.
And she has really nice teeth.
Yeah.
You notice
very, very good dental work.
Yeah,
this
her
woman.
teeth is immaculate.
But yeah.
That's the final shot is actually her head,
and
right?
So they were talking in a behind the scenes thing in a documentary, and they were saying that they wanted to open the eyes and have the Jason's mom head actually wink at the camera. And I'm not
freaky.
Well, that's why it's not in the movie, because they were like, okay, yeah, that's just going to be way too stupid and we're not going to do it. But that was discussed in a documentary. That was on the table at one time.
Funny.
That they were going to.
I'm glad they decided against that. That would have been dumb.
It was really creepy just seeing like it zoom in on her like that. If she winked, it would have been like something from like Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Her head always scared me to death. Always scared me.
Yeah,
it never really did anything for me. The dude going down the steps backwards in the rain, a handicap. Like, yeah, that scared me when I was a kid. As usual for these movies, I've taken a couple of story notes. As I was watching the movie, I picked out some cool tidbits. A few things that we've already talked about, but some we haven't. They did use the wrong end of the machete to kill What's-His-Face hanging up in the bear trap. And
no, it's not Mark.
And Mark. They actually used the wrong side of the machete to kill Mark as well. But
which made that kill even more brutal if you think about it. That means he took the blunt end of the blade to the face, man.
Yes, he did. So when Jason is stalking towards Vicky and it shows the knife and Jason's thumb is actually black, just like he had hit himself with a hammer or something, I guess, while he was building his hut in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, he mashed that thumb.
The people that stayed out all night drinking, they lived. Then, so whenever they come back, and Cage, you might have went over this and I just forgot it, but whenever Jenny and Paul get back to Camp Packanack from the bar, they actually find the bloody sheets where the two people were killed with the spear, with the pedophilia going on.
Yeah.
They actually found the bloody sheets and straight up ignored it. And they were just like, what's going on here? And then Paul was like, no, this is a joke.
I'm not falling
gonna be
for
pretty.
it, guys.
I'm like, bro, that's very much real blood.
Oh, yeah. So after Jason incapacitates Paul, I don't want to say killed because I don't know for sure that he actually killed Paul. He incapacitated Paul. Jeannie ran out to her bug and was actually going to leave Paul.
Because she knew he was dead.
Well, maybe she did. And then maybe she's just a bad girlfriend. Maybe she's just like, screw Paul.
She was actually being like a little smart, like, I'm just gonna leave.
And
Right
I'd
now.
have done the same thing, I guess. If
Yeah.
I was her, I'd been like, okay, Paul's dead. There ain't no sense in me hanging out.
Ain't
just to get
nothing I
killed.
can do right now. I might as well save myself.
I will say that another part is whenever Jason's chasing her, he chases her up into the cabin. She gets a chainsaw and she gets the chainsaw started and goes after Jason. Jason trips over a chair backwards and then immediately she cuts the chainsaw off, sets it down, and runs away.
Come on, man.
Missed opportunity. Leatherface is shaking his head, going, come on. I could have ended this in 1981, girl. What are you talking?
Dios razón.
So, yeah. The topic questions that I had, and we've already kind of discussed all this, is did Paul die? Did Muffin die? And was the dead dog that they found in the woods actually Muffin? So that was my story notes.
I think it's a yes to all those things.
Yeah.
That is my story notes.
I think they both got wrong.
I want to go out and say I am still Team Muffin, but yeah, Muffin is probably dead as well as Paul, even though it was not confirmed in the movie.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree with that.
I think that was a good breakdown of Friday the 13th Part 2. I guess the only thing we've got left to do now is rate this thing. So, Brent, why don't you tell everybody how we're going to rate it before we get started?
All right, so we're going to rate this movie just like we've rated all the movies in the past. We're going to rate cultural significance, special effects, music, symbolism, and overall enjoyment. We're going to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. And then we're going to get our average score of all of these criteria, and that's going to be our overall enjoyment of this movie.
Awesome. Who wants to go first?
I guess I can go first this time.
Let's go.
So, look, I wasn't able to watch this movie this week. I tried my best to watch this movie. I've seen the movie in the past, but I wasn't able to watch it because I thought that Tubi had the movie. It turns out it was. I turned it on an hour and a half or 2 hours before the podcast, just enough time to finish it for the podcast, and it turns out it was the Spanish version. So that's why I haven't been able to be as productive on this podcast as usual, because I've forgotten a lot of the details. It's been 3 or 4 years since I've seen the movie. But I will say this. This is what I remember from the first time that I saw it. I remember I liked it better than the original. As much as I can remember, I liked it better than the original. I love how this is where you get the iconic slasher villain of Jason. The original does not have Jason, so this is the first appearance of Jason. And so, it's just a fun slasher movie. And I think whenever I go back and rewatch the first one and this one, will almost guarantee you I'll like this one better. It's more fun. I'm pretty sure it has more kills, but you guys could correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, it does.
And then obviously it has Jason, who becomes on the Mount Rushmore, most people's Mount Rushmore of best slasher villains. And he doesn't even appear until the second movie of his franchise. And just like Cade said, he's not even wearing his iconic mask. So that's all kind of crazy. But okay, so on to my ranking. So for cultural significance, I give it an 8 because of Jason. Now, I can't give it a 10 yet for multiple reasons. I mean, number one, if you ask most people about Friday the 13th Part 2, I'm going to say unless you are a huge Friday the 13th fan or you're just a huge horror movie fan in general, You're probably not going to be able to get into specifics about this general movie, but most people could probably tell you, if you're a fan anyway, that this is the first movie with Jason. But it's not the most significant because he's not wearing his mask yet. So it's significant because you get Jason, not the most significant because he's not wearing his mask. So I give it an 8. Special effects, I give it a 5 just because I don't remember anything crazy. I mean, there's some good stuff in there. I'm sure there's some cheesy stuff in there. I mean, the head of the old lady, Jason's mom, I mean, that's pretty cool. Okay, good dental work. So I give it a 5. Music, I really like the Friday the 13th soundtrack, so I gave it an 8. It's one of those horror movie theme songs that I would like to listen to on Halloween. It's just a fun. What is it that she's saying? Is she just repeating Jason, or?
It's ki ma ma ma. All right.
Yep.
I think it is.
Ki ma ma ma.
Wow. Well, it's cool. Whatever it is, freaky. So I give it an 8 out of 10. Symbolism, I give it a 4 out of 10. The reason I gave it that high was just because it is pretty cool that the final girl in this movie was able to outsmart Jason with, like, psychology. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. That's going to boost up your symbolism score a little bit, that she was able to recognize that he has some trauma that he's got to recover from. He probably should have went through therapy. Maybe he wouldn't have been murdering people. But yeah, I mean, 4 out of 10 for symbolism. And enjoyment, like I said, I wasn't able to watch it this week, but I remember from the past, this was a fun movie. It's not one of the best movies of all time, but I enjoy watching it. It's fun, something you could put on in the background. So I gave it a 7 out of 10. That's an overall score of 6.4. So round that down to 6. So my overall enjoyment of this movie is going to be a 6 out of 10.
All right. Good job. I can agree with most of that. Daniel, what's your take, buddy?
All right, I'll go second. So we're looking at cultural significance. And again, this is very early 80s. This is when the slasher genre is first getting kind of ramped up here. You're starting to see more flesh. You're starting to see more kills. You're starting to see more blood. And that is something that continues to grow on through the 80s. So this movie is very much still a forerunner for that. So as far as cultural significance, I'm going to give this a solid 8. It actually could be higher, but the 9s and 10s are going to be reserved for Halloween, in my opinion. So cultural significance is an 8 for this movie. And the symbolism, Corky brought up a pretty good point last week whenever he was talking about the ways that we can view things that are symbolic. And so whenever we're watching Friday the 13th, especially when it comes to me and Corky, we were watching these movies when they first came out. And we were very young whenever they first come out. And whenever you're young and you watch something that you remember from being very young, it gets really nostalgic. And so for a nostalgic factor, Friday the 13th Part 2 really, really hits home for me. And then I actually made this comment, earlier on in the podcast. There's a cat that shows up in the first part of the movie, and Alice is like petting the cat, and she's talking about the cat. The cat kind of calms her down. And then she winds up being the one that gets killed and the cat does not. And so whenever you see a cat in a horror movie, especially in a 1980s slasher film, you know that somebody's about to die and the cat usually lives. So for symbolism, I'm going to give that a solid 5. Then we go on to music. Enough has already been said about the music. Just like what Corky was saying last week, if you listen to the soundtrack of any Friday the 13th movie, you immediately know what film series that you're watching, what film franchise that you're watching. So the music, I love what Harry Manfredini has come up with. So the music for me is a 10. The special effects on this, you've got probably not as good as what Tom Savini did, but you had some really, really cool kills. It was still really graphic. Like I said, the sequels to this really amp up the gore. And so the special effects for me is going to be a 9. And then, man, we're watching a Friday the 13th movie. We're watching Part 2, the first time that Jason makes an appearance. He's got the pillowcase on his head. He's killing people with, the blunt end of machetes. He's killing people with knives. He's just going berserk. So for me, the overall enjoyment is going to be a 10. That's hands down. Probably, the first 6 movies out of this series for me, you can just expect an overall enjoyment score of the 10 for me. So whenever you add all that stuff together, you come up with an 8.4, which is going to be rounded down to an 8, which is what I gave the original Friday the 13th last week. So you've got a solid 8 for me, and I'm going to go ahead and kick it back over to Cade.
All right, guys. So, much like what's been said before, obviously this movie is huge, especially with it actually being when we see Jason Voorhees go out and do his thing. I mean, we see a lot of good kills. We see good quality kills, even some, as hilarious as what we saw with old Mark here. But with cultural significance, I felt like this one deserves a pretty high score of a 10 here. We don't actually see Jason in the first movie, of course, and you see him here. So this movie is super important in establishing his presence as a brutal killer in the slasher genre, and I feel like it was super significant in that. And moving on from there to special effects, I thought that they did a really good job with the kills. This one, I know we didn't have the same guy handling this movie, but looking at, I know I talked about it before, but when Mark got killed with the machete to the face or the axe or whatever he got killed with, I mean that was brutal to see, and I thought it looked super good. So I'm gonna give that score a 9. Music, of course, we've discussed this. The soundtracks played throughout this movie are really, really good and showing the brutalness of Jason. So I think the music deserves a 9. Symbolism, this one was lower in the first film for me. In this one, it's about the same score of a 5. I thought it was cool, kind of like how Brent mentioned how they tied some psychology into this of how Jenny was able to take out Jason. So I think an average score is pretty good for that. And overall enjoyment, like what Daniel said, this is a fun movie to watch. I mean, you're talking about, a lot of movies nowadays have like 2 or 3 hour run times. I think this movie may have had like an hour and a half and some change for the runtime, and it was able to fit in all of this storytelling and all this action. So, I mean, they did a great job, and that gave me a 10 for that. And that averages my score to an 8.6, which gives me a 9 for Friday the 13th Part 2.
Awesome. So we got a 6, an 8, and a 9 from the other 3 guys. And I done told everybody when we started off this summer campfire series, as far as the Friday the 13th movies goes, the first 7 movies will be 10s all around the board for me. I'm kind of biased. They're my favorite movies of all time. So, fight me over it if you want to. But yeah, everything, culture, significance, music, special effects, it's all 10s for me. So that gives us a 6, 8, 9,
Yeah,
and a 10.
I got the average here.
What
So
you
that's
got?
an average to an 8.3 or an 8 out of 10.
Well,
for this
that's pretty
movie.
good. An 8 out of 10 for a 1981 slasher movie. You can't beat that. Guys, anybody got any final thoughts before we cut out of here tonight?
So that was
One thing I forgot to.
Well, what I was going to say was that's an 8 out of 10 for Part 2. Last week ended up being an 8 out of 10 for Part 1. Am I right?
Last week we averaged to a 9.
Okay. So Part 1 actually come in a little bit higher. Okay. All right.
But we were down 1.
We actually
Brent
were
went here
down
last
1,
week, so
and Brent did give the lowest score. So this could have been,
I bet Brent, you said you liked Part 2 better than Part 1, right?
Yeah, I believe I remember liking Part 2 better than Part 1.
So I guarantee our score probably would have been like a 7, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Because
But that's what
the reason why I was
actually,
go ahead.
Sorry, all I was going to say was I forgot to mention most people would have this rated as one of the best sequels in horror movie history. I mean, Friday the 13th Part 2. And most people would say Friday the 13th Part 2 is better than the original. And so that's something that you're not going to see in very many horror movies. I know that Dad likes Halloween Part 2 better than the original, but you're not gonna hear most people's favorite horror movie being the second or the sequel of the franchise. But in this movie, most people would say the Part 2 is better than Part 1. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there to give this movie some kudos. It definitely built on what Friday the 13th, the original, kind of started.
Most definitely. As far as these movies goes, I like Part 1. It's a 10 for me, but these movies really don't start. We're going to end up covering the majority of the Friday the 13th movies. But after this movie, we're getting into the good ones. So 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the 4 best out of the entire series.
I'm hyped.
So, we've got past 1 and 2. Now we get to the good ones, and they're coming up. So we want to make sure everybody knows they're coming up. We'll have a good time watching them. We'll have a good time reviewing them. For Brent, Cade, Daniel, we appreciate everybody listening to us. We had a lot of good reactions out of the last episode we put out for Friday the 13th Part 1. We had a lot of comments. We gained some subscribers, man, and we appreciate that for everybody. So, if you like talking about horror movies or just, movies in general, subscribe to the channel, comment to us. Man, every time we get a comment, whether it's good or bad, we enjoy it because we know people's watching it. So we appreciate everybody doing that. And for me and all the other guys, man, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week. What do you guys?
100%, man. We appreciate everybody that tunes in every week and listens to what we're talking about, good or bad. We appreciate all of it.
Take any feedback.
We appreciate all of it.
We're having a good time, man. We appreciate everybody. So we'll see you guys next week. See you. Bye.
Remember, we keep it tight, and it's a podcast world. We're ready to ignite. That's the lesson. You got it all. Tune in, turn up, come vibe with us, y'all. So remember.